The Committee on the Budget and Government Operations subject matter hearing is called to order. This is a subject matter hearing solely to discuss the quarterly update on the fiscal year 2021 annual appropriation and the Chicago Police Department's budget prior to the passage of the budget for fiscal year 2022. No vote will be taken at this meeting. Pursuant to applicable law and my determination that attendance by remote means is necessary because an in-person meeting is not practical or prudent due to the declared public health disaster caused by COVID-19. This meeting is conducted by video conference. We will now have a roll call to establish a quorum. Will the Alderman please make sure that your microphones are unmuted?
Yeah, if you can do a CFL, call Andrea.
Vice Chair Silverstein. Alderman King. Alderman Hairston. Alderman Sawyer.
Present, sorry.
Gotcha. Alderman Sawyer.
Here.
Alderman Mitchell. Alderman Harris.
Here.
Alderman Mitchell present.
Alderman Mitchell, got you. Alderman Savlosky Garza.
Present.
Alderman Thompson. Alderman Cardenas. Alderman Quinn.
Here.
Alderman Moore.
Present.
Alderman Curtis. Alderman O'Shea. Alderman Brookins. Alderman Brookins. Present.
Chairman, did you get Thompson is here?
I got you now, Alderman Thompson. Alderman Brookins.
Thank
Alderman Rodriguez.
Present.
Alderman Tabarez.
Present.
Alderman Scott.
Present.
Alderman Burnett. Alderman Irvin.
Alderman Irvin is present.
Alderman Taliaferro.
Alderman Taliaferro is present.
Alderman Roboris.
Present.
Alderman Wagisback.
Present.
Alderman Austin.
Here.
Alderman Ramirez Rosa.
Present.
Alderman Villegas. Alderman Mitz. Alderman Spizzato.
Nick Spasato's here.
Alderman Napolitano.
Present.
Alderman Riley. Alderman Smith. Alderman Tunney.
Present.
Alderman Kappelman. Alderman Osterman. Chairman Dowell's here. We have a quorum. We have 21 members present.
Alderman King is present.
Alderman King. Gotcha. There are 22 members present. At this time, the committee has been informed that there are no public speakers that have signed up for today. So this concludes the public comment period. As part of the record, however, written public comment from approximately 100 Chicago residents was emailed to the committee, and all of these letters have been provided to the alderman prior to today's committee meeting. Some of these written public comments support funding and investing in community resources, infrastructure, and violence interruption, while also expressing concerns of Chicago Police Department funding. Additional written public comment supports the Workers Center for Racial Justice and urges the committee to enact a 2022 budget that reflects the values and priorities for our communities. In addition, the Sustainable Inglewood Initiatives submitted a public comment letter urging an intergovernmental agreement between the Chicago Police Department and other government agencies to head off violence in Chicago. Okay, so this is a subject matter hearing to discuss the quarterly update on the fiscal year 2021 annual appropriations for the second quarter of this year and the Chicago Police Department's budget, which will be presented by Budget Director Susie Park of the Office of Budget and Management. Again, no vote will be taken at this meeting. In addition to Budget Director Susie Park, we are also joined by City Comptroller Reshma Soni, Chief Financial Officer Jenny Bennett, Executive Director Anastasia Walker from the Office of Public Safety Administration, and Director Kenneth Williams from the Council Office of Financial Analysis. Today's quarterly update and Chicago Police Department's budget discussion are pursuant to SR 2020-594, a previously introduced substitute ordinance. This is a general overview of the annual budget, second quarter 2021, and we will also stay focused on the CPD Police Department's budget. A copy of the quarterly report and the April, May, and June 2021 monthly revenue reports were previously emailed to everyone on August 17th. Again, no vote will be taken, and we will start with the presentation from Director Susie Park. Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you, Chairman. I'm going to share my screen for a quick presentation. Okay. Good morning, Chairman Dahl, Vice Chairman Silverstein, and members of the Committee on the Budget and Government Operations. Thank you for allowing me to be here today to provide an update on the city's finances through the second quarter for the period ending June 30th. Hopefully members of the committee have had a chance to review the second quarter report. As a reminder, the numbers presented in the report are the most up-to-date information at the time of the presentation and are preliminary, subject to change throughout the year. We'll start with revenue through June of 2021. As we begin the revenue report, I wanted to remind the members of the committee of the impacts that COVID-19 has had on the city's revenue over the past year. As compared to our pre-pandemic budget, we were down $886 million in revenues in 2020 and closed the 2021 gap to cover a $783 million shortfall in anticipated loss for 2021. However, vaccine implementation, recovery speed, and the trajectory of the pandemic all continue to be critical factors that shape our city's revenue each month. Given this, however, and as you see on the report here, the city is 6.5% above 2021 budget expectations through the end of June. Our transaction taxes continue to perform well. This includes the personal and property lease tax and real property transaction tax, as well as our income tax revenue and personal property replacement tax revenue. However, there are some other revenues that show a slower recovery from the pandemic and resulting economic downturn, but have begun to show signs of recovery. This includes transportation taxes, which includes parking tax and ground transportation tax, recreation tax, and business tax. However, the resurgence of the pandemic resulting from the Delta variant could further hinder this recovery, so we're going to continue to keep an eye on it throughout the second half of 2021. In terms of our expenses through June, overall, we are at about 44% of the budget through the end of June. The majority of our departments fall within this range, somewhere between 40 to 50% of their budget. We do have a few departments here that you see show a slightly higher percentage. This includes CDPH, DFSS, Housing, and ARES. I do want to flag that these are a result of actual encumbrances. As you note here, these are encumbrances and expenditures, so both obligations and expenses. So these departments do have, definitely for CDPH, DFSS, and Housing, there are delegate agencies within these that they, encumber right at the beginning of the year. So that also reflects kind of, you see here 74%, 72% for Housing. Those are higher due to those encumbrances. Also to flag, what you may see here is the Finance General. This is the fund or the department where our large citywide expenses are budgeted. This includes healthcare and pension. The pension payments specifically do happen towards the end of the year, if not the Q1 of the following year. So this percentage is lower, but it will be spent towards the end of the year. Briefly, I also wanted to spend a couple minutes going through our year-end estimate and forecast, since that also did come out this month. Our year-end estimate, as we show here on this chart, shows a few obligations that we are going to talk about for 2021. And you've probably heard us talking about it in first quarter. So overall, our corporate fund budget, as you may know, is $4 billion. We do expect our revenues to come in at about 4.2 and our expenditure estimates at about 4. But then we also have these additional obligations that we have talked about before. This includes the $500 million of the scoop and toss that we are not doing due to ARP funds coming in. So this is action that we have not enacted. We also have the $450 million that we've also talked about of short-term borrowing, which we did to close out 2020 to cover some of our revenue shortfall due to the pandemic. And then also third is this expense coming in this year is also our public safety retro payment, specifically around the FOP contract. So we did have some funds budgeted in our budget for this year, but we also do need an additional approximate $274 million. So this comes out to additional resources that we do need of about $1 billion. Now we show here kind of how we will address each one of those. As we said here, we do have operating expenses that are eligible for ARP. So we will be using some ARP revenue replacement funds. That is the plan to cover eligible operating expenses. That is not the 450 or the 500. We will also, and the CFO can go further into detail. If you have any questions, we'll be doing a refunding to also help cover this public safety retro specifically. And then we will be covering the 450 and the 500 with our corporate fund revenue. So that's that for 2021. Moving into 2022, as you may also have heard and seen through our forecast, our estimated gap for 2022 is $733 million. This covers some growth in our expenditures. This includes debt service. Our pension costs are going up. As you may know, we will be climbing the last of our ramp to actuarial funding for our muni and labor pensions in 2022, for 2022. So this is the increase there. And then increased personnel costs and other small increases. This drives our expenditure increase for 2022 to about $912 million. Our revenues, we project, will be increasing by about $180 million. This is continued recovery from the pandemic. So we are estimating some improved revenues for 2022, which leads to our gap of 733. With that ends my presentation. I'm happy to turn this back to Chairman Dowell to answer any questions.
Thank you, Director Parks. I want to acknowledge the presence of members, Alderman Burnett, Alderman Curtis, and Alderman Mitz. We have counted you towards the quorum. And also want to acknowledge the non-members present, Alderman LaSpada, Alderman Beal, Alderman Cardona, and Alderman Hatton. So if there are any questions, please use the raise your hand function. Are there any questions for our director? Alderman Garza, followed by Alderman Sawyer.
Thank you, Chairman. I do. Susie, did you say that we're able to use ARP funds for some of the retro pay?
No, we will not be using any ARP funds for retro. The ARP funds will be used for essential government services and operating costs.
Got it. Okay. That was my question. Thank you, Chairman Dowell.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Sawyer?
That was actually a mistake. I'm sorry, Chairman.
Okay. The next, are there any other members? Seeing none, Alderman Beal?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right. Susie, if you can just clarify, we did authorize the 500 and so million for to go out to bond. When was that decision made not to go out to bond that 500 million? Because we authorized you and you assured us that that was going out to bond, and that was part of the budget that we all voted on.
If you'd like, yes, if the CFO would like to answer that. Yes.
So Alderman Beal, I wanted to just take us back in time a moment to last year's budget. And, as a part of the budget, we had talked about the $500 million of scoop and toss and also the $450 million, which would also ultimately be through scoop and toss. And there were a lot of questions at the time around how expensive that financing would be. I know you had some questions around that. And importantly, our intent always was, to the extent that we receive federal funding, to not have to go to what would be one of the larger scoop and tosses that the city would have to issue. And so because we have received that federal funding, it gives us the flexibility to be able to avoid some of those very expensive measures, which ultimately were as a result of revenue loss. The reason we're in this situation in the first place is because the city lost $1.7 billion of revenue in 2020 and 2021. And instead of cutting services, layoffs, and significant revenue increases, we are able to maintain those services in large part because of the federal stimulus monies, which helps us to support that revenue loss.
Okay. And so going forward, you guys are anticipating using $782 million of the ARP funds towards bridging the gap for this year?
The 782 is going to cover operating expenses for 2021. So the gap is a separate, that we're working on for 2022.
Okay, and that's anticipated because we have to vote on that. And
absolutely, that's the proposal.
Okay, so that's out of the 980 million that's there. So that would only leave a couple of $100 million towards, basically trying to recover our economy.
So the full amount of, and the specific ARP funds that we are proposing this with is the state and local fiscal recovery funds. Those funds, the total amount of that award is $1.89 billion. Roughly.
Right, but we only can use 980 this year and then 980 next year, correct?
So it is coming in two tranches. We can appropriate the whole amount, but to your point, Alderman, the first 943 is coming this year, and then the second 943 million is coming next year.
Okay. So as of right now, we're only looking at a couple of $100 million that could be possibly available if you guys head your way to recover the economy here in the city of Chicago.
That would be the amount available between, when it's appropriated to the end of the year.
Okay.
To go out the door. Now, obviously there are projects and investments, so we would look at timing. The funding, the 1.86 billion does go through December 31st, 2024. In terms of obligation, and we have until 2026 to expend those funds as well.
Okay. Now, what is the total gap right now outside of the 782? If you take out all the Government Recovery Act funds, what is our bottom line gap right now?
So if we were covering the 450, we're paying that back. We are replacing the scoop and toss plus the additional amount that we need to pay for the upcoming public safety retro, police retro. It's about $1 billion altogether.
Okay, as of right now.
As of right now, yes.
Okay, over $1 billion. Okay, all right. And how much of the federal money are we using to basically rob Peter to pay Paul, pay our day-to-day expenses and use day-to-day expenses for other purposes, such as pay down debt?
So the proposal is to use some of the ARP funding for eligible activity for operating expenses. And so right now the request is for about 782 of operating expenses.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. That's all I have, Madam Chairman. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman.
Thank you, Alderman Beal. Alderman Laspada.
Thank you, Chairwoman. A couple questions. So I brought up the city refunding one-pager that we received last year in November. And it says to address 450 million of the budget gap in FY 2020 and 500 million in FY 2021 caused by revenue loss due to the pandemic, the city will refinance and restructure its debt. At the time, I don't remember us talking about doing two different programs. So I don't recall, and maybe someone can share the communication, that we were talking about taking out a short-term line of credit and then waiting till 2021 to do a debt restructuring. When although I see like in December, there's like investor reports where we talk about the short-term line of credit, when did we move towards doing short-term borrowing versus like an overall debt refinancing?
So Alderman Laspada, there was a discussion in a number of the budget committee meetings, and I actually had a discussion with you specifically around this, where you had asked us about whether we were considering the use of the municipal liquidity facility from the federal government. I mentioned the fact that we were going to be implementing a short-term line of credit on our own because we get better rates than the MLF. And, we talked about what those interest rates would be. And then ultimately that the intention was to take out short-term financing for the moment until we had a better sense of what the federal funding situation was, and then only take out the long-term debt once we had understanding of what that federal funding would look like. So this was a part of the budget discussions from last year.
And what is the rate that we got from JP Morgan Chase against the rate that we would have anticipated getting from the municipal liquidity fund?
So the rate that we got was about a 190, and from the municipal liquidity fund would have been somewhere in the mid 2%.
So, okay, would you
It
say
would be
2.3?
somewhere in the mid 2% range. I don't have the precise rate because it depends on the time in which you price the bonds, but it would have been somewhere in the mid 2% range.
And with the municipal liquidity fund, we would have had, am I correct in remembering it would have been 3 years to pay back that debt?
The maximum term of the municipal liquidity facility would be 3 years, but ultimately it was a facility that was there to support repayment of short-term financing from federal funds.
Okay. And why did we choose to do just a 1-year term with JP Morgan Chase?
Because we're trying to minimize the amount of interest that we pay. So if to the extent that our intention has always been to repay the borrowing with federal funds, then we don't want to keep that for longer than we have to.
Okay, is that, so like when we talk to our constituents about this, and we will have to talk to them about why we're using ARP revenue replacement funds for central services so that we can free up corporate funds for debt service. What is the financial benefit that Chicagoans receive by paying this debt upfront rather than choosing to restructure and refinance it?
So debt restructuring, which is otherwise known as scoop and toss, is very expensive. The way that I would analogize it is it's in essence taking out a second mortgage to pay your groceries. We only go to it in a situation like we faced in the last year, where we had a very, very significant revenue loss and one time in nature that would have been very painful for us otherwise to try to bridge. So as a result of the federal money, which the city spent a lot of time advocating for the ability to replace revenue from that money, and ultimately the Biden administration did pass this stimulus package, which allows us to do that. That federal money really provides us with the lifeline to be able to apply these to helping us to bridge our budget imbalance.
Okay. And just so I understand, like all of the options on the table, and for the sake of argument, I am not saying this is what is happening, but if council decided, for instance, we would prefer to restructure this debt, maybe not over like 30 years, but over 15. And I know that we have not voted on the police contract yet. If we were to restructure this debt, rather than pay upfront in this calendar year, what does our budget gap look like alternatively?
So our budget gap would go up by the amount of money that we restructure. So if we decided to restructure, say, for example, the 450, then our budget gap next year or in 3 years, whenever the payment came due, would go up by that same amount.
Even if we restructure our gap to pay it over a longer period of time, our budget gap in this year goes up?
No, not in this year, but in that year. So if you restructured it, say, to 2023, the following year, then your gap in 2023 goes up by the amount that you restructure by.
Okay.
So our gap
Appreciate
goes
it.
down.
Like
Our gap goes down this year by, let's just say it's the 450. It goes down this year by 450. It goes up in 2023 by 450.
I appreciate that. I'm only trying to think about like knowing that as we discussed, as you showed the factors, like our economy is not recovered yet. Maybe in some communities it's looking good. In some neighborhoods, people are still feeling a lot of pain. And so I'm just trying to understand like what the options are and whether it may be fortuitous to wait till we're in a stronger economic position, hopefully, optimistically, to refinance that or like make these payments. But I appreciate you like having the conversation.
Thank you, Alderman Laspada. Does that do it for you? Is that the end of your questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I want to acknowledge Alderman Kappelman, who has joined us. We've added you to the quorum, Alderman Kappelman. The next questions will come from Alderman Curtis.
Good morning, Chairman and Jenny and Susie. I just have one question. With our revenue loss for 2020 and 2021, it still sounds like that we shouldn't have an issue. Well, there was a lot of people to retire 2020 and 2021, and it sounds like that we wouldn't have a problem replacing those workforce bodies. Am I correct?
Citywide, yes. I mean, we are, we're filling vacancies at this point, and trying to keep up with that attrition. So, I don't, following the hiring speed. I mean, but they're financially, we are allowing departments to move forward.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Alderman Curtis. I also want to acknowledge Alderman Nugent, who has joined us as a non-committee member. And we have our next questions from Alderman Rodriguez.
Madam Chair, I'll pass for now, but thank you.
Okay. Seeing no more hands, oh, one more. Alderman Moore.
Thank you, Chairman. Quick question. Have we looked at, say something like AIS, and then and we can pick out any other department, and I just choose that as an example. As we are looking at shortfalls, I remember in corporate America, when we did these like quarterly budgets and we anticipated certain expenditures, whether it was on, projects or things. And as we got to the quarter, so as we got into these presentations, we said, you know what, based on some trends and things that's happening, that can probably wait till next year or 2 years from now. Have we looked at anything like that, things that we budgeted for to say, you know what, we thought we really need to do this, but due to some efficiencies or anything else that, this can actually probably wait 3 years from now. Do we have any of that in here to, pull back some of that money to help cover the shortfall?
So we did a lot of that last year, Alderman. As you recall, the pandemic hit us like mid-budget. And so we did a lot of that exercise last year of, hiring, contracts, like what, and given the pandemic, like, we did go through everyone's budget, and I'm sure every department head could attest to this, that, we did go through that exercise.
Okay.
And we do that every budget. We look at it, we say, what contracts, what projects are coming down the line? What's the time frame? Is it a 2-year, 3-year? How much do we need to budget for to meet that specific year? So to your point, Alderman, we do that exercise each year. And for sure last year, we came out in the shape that we did, partially because all the departments, pitched in, and we went through everyone's budget to say, what positions could we hold?
Right.
Where could we pause certain things? So we did a lot of that also last year.
Okay, thank you. That's it, Chairman.
Thank you, Alderman Moore. Alderman Beal.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just got one last quick question. Has overtime been not authorized for this weekend, Labor Day weekend, along with days off being canceled?
I actually do not know. So we can look into that for you, Alderman. And are you talking about citywide or at the police department?
Yes.
Citywide?
Mm-hmm. So you would know prior to if an order came down to not pay overtime? that, you know?
I did not say anything. I mean, it did not come from me. I'm not aware of any order that said not to pay overtime for Labor Day.
Okay. All right, could you get back to me today and let me know if that's accurate?
Yes, is there a specific department you were wondering about, or is it?
I'm hearing citywide that there's not going to be any overtime for Labor Day weekend, and we're not canceling days off.
Okay, I'll look into that for you, Alderman.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Beal. Alderman King.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Jenny and Susie. Just a couple follow-up questions. Can you talk about the property replacement tax and it's I think you said it overperformed by 73%. Can you explain that a little bit?
So I was going through just a couple lines on the reports regarding what is performing better than it is, than budgeted. Some of that is the transaction tax. This includes our lease tax that we raised last year. We've been doing it incrementally and definitely around computer leases. Real estate transfer is also part of that. So, those two for sure, we are seeing gains in, as well as the personal property replacement tax is one of them. And that is a tax that we get from the state. So if that's what you're referring to, those are some of the ones in our revenue lines that are performing better than budget at this point.
So what was it projected and how much was collected?
The personal property, I believe the budget, let me see right here. The budget was about 147 million. And year to date, I believe we're at about 106 million.
So
we are doing about 73% better improved.
So you're projected to be about 73%.
We're doing it about 73%, yes, of the budget.
Right now, currently.
Yes, correct.
And what's the portion that's making, you said that you think it's a real estate transfer tax, which?
Oh, so that's under our transaction taxes. If you see on the reports, pieces of those include the real estate transfer as well as our lease tax.
Okay. And you're saying that the police budget is about 48% below?
Oh, we haven't got, the police budget here. Let me look at expenses.
And does that include overtime?
So the police budget is at 48% of their budget. So their spend is, right in line around the halfway mark through June 30th. So that's what that's showing.
So you're saying they're on track?
They are correct.
Okay. And then just a couple questions to Alderman Beal's point earlier. With the scoop and toss and the kind of replacement of our budget, you're saying net will have about 200 million left. Is that correct? Did I hear him correctly?
In terms of the full budget, so we went through Alderman Beal's question, I think was kind of what was the additional additional amount that we needed, which was the $1 billion. That's what we addressed, was the 500 million for the scoop and toss that we did not enact. It's the 450 million repayment for covering 2020, in addition to the difference that we need to cover the upcoming FOP contract retro pay.
Okay, and then how much would that leave?
So what we're doing is, so that all together adds up to $1 billion extra that we need to cover in 2021. So how we're addressing that is with some of the, between our year-end estimate for revenue and expenses, there's about 200 million there, plus using some ARP funds, as well as some refunding, are all different pieces and how we're going to.
When you say some, how much ARP funds?
782 is what we are proposing right now.
Okay, of the $1 billion.
Of the 1.89 billion.
So of the 2 billion approximately,
That has
but for
come-
2 years, what would that be?
So the 1.89 billion of ARP funding is coming in 2 tranches. So the first tranche is coming this year, has come in.
It's already
That's-
come in. When did that come in, by the way?
I think towards the end of May.
Okay, all right, go ahead. And the other portion comes in?
Next year. So that's the
But-
second 943.
Okay.
But we
we're
have
doing
till
this-
2024 to spend it, to obligate it, and we actually have till 2026 to expend all of those funds.
Right. Just kind of a larger question, because, you know, a number of my colleagues have talked about, you know, if we decide to kind of refinance it over a number of years to try and take care of some of the issues that have arisen due to COVID. What, obviously you guys are presenting a budget that takes care of the scoop and toss first, so to speak. Have you looked and weighed kind of those options of looking at some of the other really, you know, large issues that have come to light over COVID versus paying, you know, kind of scoop and toss immediately, and some different versions of that? Or, you know, have you weighed the cost of doing that? Because I think there's certain things that if we don't get to and address right now could cause longer term problems that may be, you know, financially burdensome. And have you kind of done that narrative, you know, comparison? Or are you kind of waiting for us to help with that? What are some scenarios that you guys have looked at?
I could start, and definitely, you know, Jenny can chime in, but, you know, I think that as we, and I know Alderman, you were there at our first working group session. You know, that's a lot of the discussion we're having, even around, you know, as we work towards the 2022 budget. And absolutely, I agree, you know, on the investments and the need in addressing that.
Yeah, I would say in that discussion, I mean, it was pretty just, you know, an overview, but I would also say that I know from my colleagues, there are a number of issues that they want to address that I don't see these proposals addressing. And so and you've heard them from different people, and I just want to know how you've kind of weighed those, and because you're proposing something that's slightly different. Well, I would say it's largely different. But I want to get your professional opinion on the cost of addressing those things or not addressing those things, and the impact that it can have financially, you know, on us long-term versus paying debt down immediately and the impact that has on us long-term. I know you guys have looked at that, but I want your professional opinion.
So just to add to Susie's comments, we have definitely taken a look at the importance of making investments in various areas. We've heard a lot of need, for example, in mental health, in affordable housing, in anti-violence, and a number of different initiatives. And then in addition to that, weighed that versus the repayment of, you know, what in essence is a scoop and toss, which also has very negative ramifications. And, you know, for you and others who have been around the city council for a long time, I know you know, had a lot of discussion around scoop and toss and what that means for the city's financials. And so we are working towards a proposal that'll balance both, and understanding the importance of investments, and, you know, that there are significant needs, but also understanding that we need to find a financially responsible path forward, are working towards trying to bridge that balance in the proposal we make to council.
Yeah. And what portion of the scoop and toss would you say was from the last couple of years?
All of it. All of it is really from 2020 and 2021 revenue loss.
So, okay. And how much additional money would you say that we needed to cover kind of all of those things, the needs that you mentioned that are really important, as well as the scoop and toss?
So we've been working through identifying what those total needs are. You know, we are working towards what will be a sizable investment package. The exact dollar amount, I can't tell you at this point because we are still working through that.
I don't need the exact. I mean, we're just round numbers. We're good.
Like I said, we're still working through the budget. I think, there's 3 weeks left before we intro budget, and a lot is changing on a daily basis. I couldn't wager to guess what that number is at this point.
When you say 3 weeks left, what do you mean?
Towards a budget intro in September.
Right. So we've got to start, the discussion sooner than later. So when could we have that projection of what you think it would be?
So I will say, part of our, what we have been discussing, in the second work group is really the list of investments. And to your point, Alderman, what the right amount is. I think, as Jenny stated, like right now, we don't know. And that's part of what we're working towards with budget of, we want to address the needs. As Jenny stated, it is going to be a balance with also, being fiscally responsible. And trying to address both of those things and what that right balance is.
Right. And my last question, and I'll let some of my colleagues continue, is are there other kind of progressive revenues? I know you mentioned a real estate transfer tax. Have we thought about, going back to Springfield, what that would mean, since we know that we would probably get a lot of money to the tune of hundreds of millions from that. Is that on the table to talk about both short-term and long-term structural debt?
Yeah, so we have continued to push for additional revenue streams. This last session, I think, was just very much a different session than what we've experienced in previous years. And a lot of various issues came up throughout the session, which made it difficult for all of our issues to be heard, but we'll continue to push for additional revenues that, would help to support the city's budget. I think we're also cognizant of the fact that in the midst of what is a very difficult economic circumstance, increasing taxes can be counterstimulative to that economic recovery. And so we want to also make sure that we're speeding up that economic recovery as much as we can, since the city's nearly over $700 billion GDP is really one of our best and most powerful tools for helping to address our financial issues.
Yeah, I hear that. I think the one-time sales tax, as you can see, that the housing market is doing quite well, and I think adding a little resources for the city while that boom is happening, I think is a good thing. I don't think it would slow it down, especially if we do it in such a way not to do that. So I really want to encourage us to look at that, especially because it's, long-term, it's structural, and it's a lot of money. And we have a lot of issues to deal with. And, as you've suggested, they're important and we need to weigh them seriously. But if we can bring in more revenue and not rob Peter to pay Paul, as one of my colleagues suggested, then I think that would be the best of both worlds. So, but thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Alderman King. Alderman Rodriguez.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and sorry for circumventing your process here. Alderwoman King's line of questioning did spark a clarifying question for me around the real estate transfer tax. Jenna, did you say that the real estate transfer tax and revenues this year have exceeded our expectations?
I think Susie said that, but yes, the real estate transaction tax has exceeded our original budgeted amount.
And do we break that down by whether properties over $1 million or not have driven that or not, or is that not bifurcated in that way?
It's not bifurcated in that way, but it's I can tell you that by way of the activity, it's really across the board. We've seen home sales across all different price ranges be at historic highs by way of both price and volume. And so it's really home sales across the board.
I would like to break that down in some way, and maybe we can do that through a request through the chair, and maybe we can have a follow-up conversation about how that might look. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
All right, that's all, Madam Chair. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alderman Rodriguez. Alderman Osterman has also joined us and will be counted towards the quorum. Alderman LaSpada.
Well, thank you, Chairwoman. One more quick question, and only because I want to ask the questions now before we get into budget hearings, because I will have 10 minutes then. But if I go back to the city refunding one page, so I'm looking at the final page of this, transaction debt service impact present value. It says, and I'm only asking, I'm going to read the bullet points because I would love it if you could help me understand what this says. So it says $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow. $1 of costs in 30 years is only 29 cents today. Because of this, the transaction overall, meaning the restructuring, refinancing proposed to us last year, the transaction overall has a present value savings of $31 million. I was hoping you could help me because I am still learning municipal finance, but what does it mean to say a transaction has a present value savings of 31 million? Could you talk to me more about that?
Sure. So the refinancing in totality that was being described there, in essence, was a refinancing of certain bonds that contain savings, but then it also pushed off debt into the future. And so what it did was created a significant amount of savings in the front end, which was roughly about $950 million. But then every single year thereafter created an increase in debt service from what we would have paid otherwise. And that is the very core of the definition of a scoop and toss. In essence, you're going to increase your debt service on the out years, you're going to decrease your debt service costs in the short term, and create some near-term budgetary relief. What we then do is, because that increase, if you increase it $1 in 30 years, versus increasing it $1 today, that $1 in 30 years is probably only really worth 3 cents today. And so what we, basically do is we do a calculation of that present value to today. And overall, when you sum up every single one of those present value calculations, that sums up to a total savings of $31 million. The issue, though, is that, even though there are significant near-term dollar savings today, there is increased debt service in the future. And so that increased debt service needs to get incorporated into the corporate fund budget, becomes a part of our budget gap, and ultimately is additional costs that the city has to find to be able to repay that debt.
And this was so when we say net present value savings, does that mean that it not only has a short-term savings for the city, but overall, it is a savings? I'm just trying to understand the term better.
Net present value, it really means just the kind of the calculation of all the cash flows together, also taking into account a factor for time value of money, that yes, that transaction overall in theory would have had a net present value savings to the city.
Okay.
So let me also just add another fact to that. We are now, because we're no longer doing the scoop and toss, we're proposing to do the refunding for savings transaction. That refunding for savings will save the city roundly about $232 million, which is what we're using to pay for the FOP retro. So just to give you a sense, that transaction that you're referring to, because it included the scoop and toss, had a net present value savings of $32 million. Now, because we've excluded the scoop and toss component of it, it actually has more like $230 million in savings to the city.
And the refinancing for the retroactive police pay, how is that not scoop and toss? Would you differentiate that for me?
Sure, because the debt service in every year going forward is lower than what is existing today. So all we're doing is we're taking lower interest savings from the fact that interest rates are very low right now. But in every year, we're paying at or lower than our existing debt service profile.
Okay. I appreciate it. I mean, it feels like last year when we were being asked to vote for it, it was debt restructuring and refinancing with savings. And now that we're being asked to vote against it, we're talking about it as scoop and toss. Even though I believe both things were true at the same time, it feels like the discussion has shifted, which is why I'm just trying to get at all of the facts of the matter so I can make the most informed decision I can. So I appreciate the clarity on all this. Chairwoman, I appreciate you offering me a second round. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Laspada. Alderman O'Shea has joined us, and we've added you to the quorum. We also have Alderman Lopez join us as well. Before we go to Alderman Lopez's question, Susie, can you explain the delay in the state reimbursements? Is that reflecting a delay in payments or just a reduction in what they would, give to us? Or reimburse to us?
So are you talking, Chairman, about the line that state reimbursements on the revenue
Yes.
sheet? That's a very
Yes.
small amount. I think it's about 4 million. Let me look right here. And this is really a specific reimbursement for public safety training. I do think it's more of a timing issue versus not getting it. So
Okay.
it is for a specific item.
All right, thank you. Alderman
Thank you.
Lopez. Alderman Lopez.
Thank you and good morning, Chairman, and good morning, members of the committee. Forgive me for joining late, but I do want to thank you for having this quarterly meeting to discuss our budget, and thank you to the financial team for being here. Just real briefly, is it possible, and I was trying to find it in your statement that you provided us, do you have a breakdown by department, by fund of where their spending has been? Was that included? I don't think I saw anything of that nature.
So we presented by corporate, but if you would like to see it by fund, by department, I could provide that through the chair.
Yes, if you could provide that by fund, by department.
Sure.
For the first and second quarter so that we can see how our spending has been. I don't think we got that last quarter, but now we can see what the 6-month trajectory has been. I would appreciate that, especially as we're looking to see where our how quickly our dollars are going out, and if there's an issue of being able to balance on paper as we're getting through some of this. And then the second question I have for you is, what is the tipping point when it comes towards our borrowing versus the amount of revenues available for new spending versus, how much money that we've got committed, how much of our revenue is committed just to taking care of our current debt obligations?
And Alderman, when you say tipping point, what do you mean by that? Just so I understand the question.
So, like any household, we know that, sometimes you have more money committed or owed on a monthly basis than you have in your paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
How far are we from being in that predicament as a city?
Okay.
Or
So
this year?
Yeah. No, it's a great question. So in 2020 and 2021, and we look at it collectively because in essence, it is the, the bookends of our time during COVID. We lost $1.7 billion in revenues on $4.5 billion corporate fund budget. And so in essence, it's almost, like in your household, when you lose significant amounts of income, you have to make ends meet. And there are a number of ways that we could have made ends meet: go out and get additional income, reduce our expenditures in our home, or alternatively go to, our borrowing, which is where we ended. But with the anticipation that we would receive federal funding to help us support us through this time frame. With that, and also importantly, because of what the city was already facing even pre-COVID with the municipal and laborers pension ramp coming up in 2022, our overall challenges to begin with, that's the, culmination of many of the financial obligations that we have going into 22 and 23. It's very important as it relates to our ratings, as it relates to our financial stability overall, to be able to not rely on large one-time measures like scoop and toss, which obligate us in years going forward to more debt. And the federal funds have given us an ability to do that. With all of the work that's going on with budget right now, we are taking a look at how it is that we can bridge that path towards a more balanced and structural financial situation, and are looking at that both in the context of 22 and 23, and ensuring that we have that path forward to what is a financially secure and stable situation for the city going forward. So it's a delicate balance. And obviously, we're also very much focused on what investments are needed in the city and are taking a look at those needs and how supporting those needs will support the eventual recovery for the city of Chicago overall, which again will be supportive of our financials, and are working to make a proposal that'll strike both of the balance of both of those.
Okay. The reason I bring that up is because clearly I know that we know that the pandemic and that those issues on our budget, we know that we've been borrowing more, and I know that I think I've heard that we're going to be borrowing more still. I was just curious where we are, and I think I even asked this last budget cycle, where we're at with having more debt obligations than we have revenue possible. So just trying to get a sense of if that's where we're at yet, or if that's something that is going to be coming down in the future. I would like to ask, if I may, Chairman, with regards to some of the vacancies, have we filled any of the vacancies that were in this budget when it was passed last year up for the first 6 months of this year, or are we relying on those vacancies, particularly those vacancies in the police department, to kind of cover the gap, so to speak, when this budget season comes to when this budget cycle comes to an end?
So we have not implemented a higher slowdown or anything like that. Last year was a difficult year because we had the pandemic mid-budget. For this year, departments have been submitting their requests and going through the hire process like a normal year. So we have not slowed down, police hiring, to your question, Alderman, or departments.
So how many of our departmental vacancies in the budget have actually been filled? Understanding, Ms. Park, that yes, you may not have a slowdown, but that doesn't necessarily mean we've seen an uptick in hiring either. I've heard in some departments we can't even get volunteers cleared, least of all actual employees. So to that point, can we have a breakdown of the vacancies by department compared to what it was when the budget was published versus what it is today?
Sure. And for every department, sure.
For all departments, yes, please.
Yes.
Through the chair.
Yes, through the chair,
Director
please.
Park.
Yes,
All
Chairman.
right.
I'll request, of course, through the chair, Madam Chairman.
I just wanted to make sure.
And then as well, for the vacancies that are remaining, do we anticipate that we're actually going to fill them this year? So for example, if a department had 100 and they filled 40, are they going to be pushing to fill the remaining 60? Or are those just going to be carryovers in the budget? I think that would be
okay. And we'll have to work with the departments. As you probably know, Alderman, they're different. All the positions are probably in different portions of the hire cycle. So I think that's additional information we'll try to get from the departments about what their plan is for the last half of the year.
And this will be my last comment, Chairman, and thank you. With regards towards the revenue collection for ticketing and for quality of life issues, for making sure people are in compliance. Compliance issues, I think, is the term. I want to first thank Comptroller Sony for meeting with my office and having a discussion about what we can do to ensure that we are positively enforcing the law while being cognizant of people's predicament. Look forward to working with her and her team on addressing some of those. But what are we doing to ensure that all of those quality of life issues in our neighborhoods that, yes, they might have a citation and fine attached, but also have a huge impact on positive quality of life in our neighborhoods? Are we going to continue to not only enforce, but also expand enforcement with regards to these issues such as parking, whether it's residential parking or things of that nature, knowing that we are having difficulty in terms of manpower trying to keep up with compliance in the communities?
And thank you, Alderman Lopez, and the support that you've been giving to us and all the aldermen as well. We, over the last year to year and a half, we've done a lot of community enforcement. So we're trying to structure our enforcement just to the point that you are making, Alderman Lopez, that quality of life. Where can we do enforcement that it helps the residents and the individuals, whether it be the RPP, the residential parking permit areas, or looking at even areas where there's a lot of congestion and residents who are living on a street where people may be parking at toll zones and shouldn't be working with streets and sand to do that. A lot of our enforcement has increased in those type of areas that, based upon the discussions we've had with the aldermen. We also are working with our vendors who help us to do enforcement on nights and weekends. And I know in some of the areas, particularly, we want more enforcement on nights and weekends. So we've restructured some of our hiring measures with those companies so they are able to bring on more workforce to be able to do that kind of enforcement. We're also being cognizant for the fact that while we're doing enforcement, there's another issue of quality of life, whereas, can people afford what we ticket? And we're looking at fines and fees reform, which we'll be bringing to City Council later on during the budget cycle for your approval. But any feedback that we can get, we're really trying to customize this for the wards, that if there's any kind of specific kind of enforcement that you would like us to do, we are structuring our teams so they can do that kind of enforcement and help that quality of life issue.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Beal, last questions, and then we'll move on to the police department budget. Alderman
right.
Beal.
Thank you again for the third time, Madam Chairman. How much police overtime have we spent thus far?
Let's save that for the police department. We're getting ready to focus on the police department budget now.
Okay, and same thing as far as vacancies?
Yes, well, this is
I'll
on
have those
their
numbers
budget.
in the next. I have those numbers in the next presentation.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Alderman.
Wait.
Thank you, Alderman. This ends the subject matter hearing for the second quarter budget report. We will now move to the 2021 Police Department budget. Director Parks.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to bring up my screen again. Give me a moment here. Okay. Okay, thank you. So thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity today to discuss CPD's budget for 2021 as we plan for the CPD's 2022 budget. As Chairman Dowell mentioned at the beginning, with me today is also Anastasia Walker, who is the Executive Director of the Office of Public Safety Administration. Just an overview of where CPD stands today. So across all funds, CPD's budget is about $1.69 billion. They're funded across 6 different funds, mostly the corporate fund, but they also have grant funds. Both O'Hare and Midway also support the police department budget. And then we have 2 smaller funds, which is the Police CTA Detail Fund, as well as the Controlled Substance Fund. If you see here on this page, 89% of the funds is for personnel, while 11% of the budget is for non-personnel. This here just gives you a snapshot of the CPD budget across all funds in the city, exclusive of Finance General, which you heard in the first part, is really our department that really pays for the pension and healthcare and other citywide costs. If you exclude that department specifically, then CPD makeup is about 21.66% of the city's total budget across all funds. Going through the different lines in CPD's budget, this is all local funds, so it is excluding grants. However, what I do want to show here is that, again, the majority of CPD's budget entails in personnel costs. What I've also highlighted here in yellow is that many of the lines and the amounts you see here are all contractually required payments. So, again, salary, overtime, duty availability, uniform allowance, everything you see down the line here are within their contracts and costs, for different things for the police department personnel. On the non-personnel side, you'll also see that the top 3 non-personnel line items, which includes the settlements and judgments line, is about $82.5 million. We also have non-workers comp costs for about 19 million. And then the consent decree is about 7.7 million. This is again, just the non-personnel side of the budget. We also do have consent decree personnel that is included in the larger salary and wages here. But as you'll see here, what this tells you essentially is that, the majority again of CPD's budget is around personnel costs. And even the top 3 lines of their non-personnel budget is really around settlements and judgments, workers' comp, and consent. Going quickly through just the positions, you may all be familiar, but this goes through their top number of budgeted positions across all funds. It is the PO, the police officer title, with about 9,693 positions. And then you see moving down the line, it's sergeants, detectives, FTOs, and lieutenants are the top budgeted sworn. And then you see a little bit of civilian titles as well. And lastly, this just gives a highlight of budgeted positions throughout CPD's budget, since personnel again is a big portion of their budget. Here you see historically, where they have been. This does include both sworn and civilian. It is all positions across all funds, but you'll see here kind of the trajectory of the positions and the position count in the police department over the years. So this year in the budget is about 14,051. There have been, in 2012, 2013, 13 at the highest, it was about 14,917. So with that, I will turn it back over to Chairman Dowell to answer any questions you may have regarding the budget.
Thank you for your presentation, Director Park. Are there any members of the committee that have questions? And if not, okay, Alderman Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Will we get, I didn't recall seeing that, what we just put up on the screen in terms of the graphs and everything. Are we going to receive that?
Yes, I'm happy to share that with Chairman Dowell.
Okay, and now, Ms. Park, can I ask, you had on there, can you put back up the graph? Is there a way to do that with the number of positions and so on and so forth?
Yes. Is it this one, Alderman?
Yes. Okay. So the 9,693 police officers.
Yes.
So that
is budgeted.
Okay. So when we originally had the police at 13,500, police force at 13,500.
Yes, in 20, like in the 20.
Now you're including there, that was police officers. We weren't including the civilians rather.
Right, this shows
what I'm trying to get at is how many.
Oh, I'm sorry, Alderman.
I'm sorry, my Wi-Fi is not good. You sort of. Oh, what were you? I'm sorry. Can you?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear your question.
Alderman Thompson? We'll come back to you, Alderman Thompson. Looks like you're having some connection issues. We'll come back to you. Alderman Osterman.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Susie. My question relates to salvage in the budget year to date and what's expected by year end. If you have that, or with the vacancies that are there, how much salvage is there and what do we expect to have by the end of the year?
Alderman, I do not have that with me in terms of our year end estimate for the police department, so I could get you that through the chair.
If you could do that through the chair, as well as the vacancies by title, and are there any hiring classes that are going to be done or filled by the end of the year?
That we do have, I do have. So I can, the salvage I will have to provide through the chair. In terms of vacancies, so across, are you looking for across the whole department? There's about 1,066 vacant positions.
How many are in patrol officers?
By PO, by the police officer title, it's about 400.
Okay. Again, if you could provide that through the chair by title, I would appreciate it. Thank you,
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Alderman Osterman. Susie, how many vacancies when the budget was approved were there
Oh, how many vacancies?
in the police department? When we passed the budget last year, what was the number of vacancies that we included?
Oh, that's a good question. I do not have that with me right now. This is as of the end of last year, Chairman.
When we passed the budget
For
we
2021.
said that for 2021, we identified a number for the vacancies within the police department. I'm trying to compare what that number was then and what it is now.
Okay. I don't, I'll have to pull, I can pull later, what that number was during budget. I don't have that with me.
All right. Going back to Alderman Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know what happened to the Wi-Fi in my office here, but I picked up a little bit. I heard Alderman Osterman. I think that's what I was getting at, is trying to understand how many vacancies we have, how many vacancies are we down? And this could all come through the chair, and you just asked some of the same questions I was going to ask too. So if that's all coming through, as well as how many cadets do we currently have in the academy?
Sure. So so we have the vacancy number. It is across both sworn and civilian, it's 1,066 vacancies right now. Oh, as of August, as of beginning,
1,066.
as of August 5th, yes.
So if I added up that graph, which you'll share with us, and I added to that 1,066, that gets me to 13,500 police officers.
Let me pull up the graph here. And you're looking at for 2021? So I'll give you the breakdown for 2021. Its total budgeted is 14,051 positions. That was the last bar on the chart.
And how many of those are police officers?
So of that, 13,244 are sworn, which is, police officers, detectives, all of the sworn titles. And then 807 of them are civilian titles.
Got it.
So right now, in terms of the vacancy, we have 877 sworn vacancies and 189 civilian vacancies.
Got it.
In terms of classes,
And
oh, yes, sorry. Alderman, did you have another follow-up question on that?
no, go ahead.
Oh, so I think the other question was on classes, which I also think Alderman was.
I'm losing the Wi-Fi. God, I wish we could go back in person.
So I could tell you, we have about
I'm sorry.
100. I can come back and answer that question.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Okay, Alderman Thompson, you back? No,
Yeah, I'm sorry, Chair.
okay. Well, we hear you.
I'm trying. I'm pedaling as fast as I can to get my power going.
We hear you, so ask your question.
Okay. I wasn't asking a question. I was fine. I was just trying to listen, but my Wi-Fi keeps going out, so it's drawn. So if Susie, if you get all that through the chair,
Yes,
if I have any
I will.
questions, I can follow up after.
Okay, sounds good.
Susie, could
Thank
you
you.
repeat for the current CPD vacancies of 1,066, how many are sworn and how many are civilian?
877 are sworn and 189 are civilian.
Okay. Thank you. We'll go to Alderman Kappelman.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. I know, what's the comparison of the settlements for 2021 and what we anticipate the settlement budget for 2022?
So the settlement budget remained the same from last year to this year. It's about 82.5 million. We do expect it to come at budget. So our year-end estimate has us right at budget for our year-end for settlements and judgments for the police department.
How was it last year?
I do believe it was similar. I can double check for you, but I do think it was also within budget last year as well.
Okay, I'm asking because, with the work done with the consent decree and reform, I'm hoping that the amount for lawsuits set aside will go down. Do we anticipate that happening?
I mean, that is the goal. I think with all of the, the work started through our risk manager, as well as, the work being done with reform management. And really, we've been working with the law department also and just trying to see kind of what's coming down the pipeline. I think with all of the work that's been happening, that is the goal, is to bring the cost of settlements and judgments down.
And then, there's, discussion, we have a number of police retiring record numbers, and I'm also hearing number of newer recruits, people who've been on the force for 4 or 5 years are being recruited to leave, to go to the suburbs. So with that, and I'm wondering, with the short staff that some say that we have one CPD helicopter. Are we looking at maybe having more? Because that could also help with the smaller numbers of police, or even I'm hearing discussions about the use of drones to help follow some of these people who carjack, and where we can
Alderman
address
Kappelman,
that. Yes.
we're looking at the 2021 budget, and
Okay.
we're not looking at the 2022 budget needs, for example.
All right.
So if you could hold on to that question until the budget hearings, that would be helpful.
Thank you. And that's it for me. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you very much, Alderman. Alderman Beal.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just got a couple of quick questions. Getting back, how much overtime have we spent thus far, and what's our projected overtime for this year?
Through the July payment, we anticipate, which the final GL has not posted, so this could vary slightly, but our estimate is around $86 million for overtime.
86
through July. Yes.
Okay,
for the July payment.
but you say that something hasn't posted.
That number's preliminary until the general ledger finally actual posts, but that is our estimate for where we will be with the July payment, is around $86 million.
Okay, so
July,
I'm sorry, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. And then your second question was, where do we anticipate year end? Right now, it is somewhere between, my year end estimate is around 140 to 150 right now.
Okay, 140 to 150. Okay. And does it usually take this long for the ledger to post for the second quarter?
So usually the July comes right at the end of August. So we are within like a day or two, which is why I'm caveating it, but it will be somewhere in that range.
Okay.
It does take about a little bit over 30 days after the end.
And getting back to the vacancies, the 14,051, is that number including the 600 vacancies that we wiped out of the budget with this year?
That is the 2021 number, so it does not include any vacancies that were cut last year.
But I mean, we had 600 and something vacancies. Getting back to the chairman's question, we know we had at least 600 vacancies that were wiped out of this year's budget. So when you look at the overall number, vacancies of 877, that's also, if we added the 600 to that, that would get us around, what's that, 1477.
But that is not that budgeted. But yes, to your question, last year we reduced CPD by 600 vacancies.
By 600 vacancies, okay. So we're down about 1,400 officers right now. And how many do we anticipate retiring?
So in terms of attrition,
and how many have retired?
Through the end of July, our attrition number is about 604.
Through July, okay.
through the end of July, correct?
Is that included in your 1451 number?
Yes, if they are, so in my vacancy count, if they have left, that position is vacant, then yes, that's included.
Okay, and what's the projection for the end of the year?
So the end of the year is somewhere around 725
Another 700?
for now. Oh, no, it's not another. It's on top. So
Okay, all right, that's, I said.
don't add another.
No, I asked a specific question. I said,
Right.
how many for the end of
No,
the year?
no.
So-
Yes,
okay.
through the end of the year, we expect about 725 for now. Yes.
Okay, all right, so that's an additional
About
200.
100, about 120.
120, okay. All right. Okay. All right, you know, I guess it's, so overall, we're gonna be down from 2020, we're gonna be down around 1,600 officers. Is that? If you look at last year, the 600 vacancies plus the 879 plus the 120 projected, we're looking at about 1,600 towards the
No,
end
we
of
are, but there are also classes. I think part of that is, you know, we are running classes to try to keep up with attrition. Now, you know, last year, as you know, Alderman, we had COVID, so we did have to stop training for a few months. So, you know, but we have been working on classes. CPD, you know, we're working with them on their 2022 budget. And what their hire plan is going to be for next year. And there is a robust plan to, you know, run classes every month to keep up with attrition. We were doing that prior to COVID. You know, there was a hire surge. There was a intent to keep up with attrition and a plan to do that. And then, you know, we fell behind due to, you know, COVID. And so that is coming back in place for next year. So, but we are running classes as well this year. So, you know, there are classes that are already in the academy right now. I believe there's 4. And then we have 3 more planned between October, November, and December. So there is a cycle to try to replace the vacancies.
Okay, and how many, the last test that was given, how many took the test?
That's a good question. Anastasia, do you have that number?
I do not have the
3,000.
I would like for the panel
We
to
can send
answer
that
the
through the
question.
tray.
Thank you.
We could send that through the chair, Alderman, in terms of the last exam.
Okay. So I'm hearing it was less than 2,000 that took the test. And with that, I mean, we know that a lot of people are going to be phased out because of the, you know, just the process. And so how do we expect to get our 1,600 officers back if we're only getting a small pool of people taking the test?
So we are working, so there, it's a 2-pronged plan, and, you know, Anastasia can definitely add on to this, is that, you know, we are working with CPD on a robust recruitment plan, and also for testing. You know, again, you know, we're working with HR. There's a rolling test, and it's online as well. So we have both options. You can come test in person as well as online. And we have changed it so that it's not this big date that everyone has to hit, because, you know, with the last surge, that's, you know, we've learned that, you know, there are dates that people can't make. And so now it has become rolling and online. So we have tried to make it as flexible for anyone that's interested to take the exam. So, you know, between a robust recruitment, you know, access to testing, and then we want to try to hold, the plan is to hold a class every month. I mean, you know, between all 3 of those, which, you know, we're going to work on all 3 prongs of that to really get a class running each month next year to, you know, and the end of this year to keep up with attrition.
I can add to that, Alderman, if you want me to.
Yes, please.
We will have a class in October. We'll have a class in November. We will have a class in December. For 2022, we expect to have a class every single month, like Susie said. But for this year, in addition to the classes that we're going to have October, November, and December, we're also going to have 2 in-person classes, 2 dates in October and 2 dates in December. And those in-person classes will happen at Truman, Kennedy King, and Malcolm X. And each of those schools will have an exam on those 2 dates in October and December. For 2022, like Susie said, we will have a class every month.
Okay, but it still takes, you know, what, 18 months to get a officer off probation?
So the training is 6 months. And then they are on their probationary FTO period, I believe, for 3 months. So it is, they're in the field within that 6 months, with an FTO. I believe that's 3 months. And then, they're fully on their own, I guess, at 9. So it is not 18.
Okay, all right. These numbers are very disturbing, especially with all the crime and issues and carjackings and everything that we're dealing with in the city of Chicago. To drop almost 1,600 officers is very disturbing. So hopefully we can turn this ship around in a timely manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Beal. Alderman Spizzato, followed by Alderman LaSpada.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You're running an awesome meeting. I appreciate you and Director Park. Madam Chair and Director Park, sorry to spurt out some information. I had my hand up and I should have waited for my turn. So, Director Park, I have some facts for you, and for some reason it will not allow me to text it to you. I tried again today. So
Okay.
as we talked in our previous meeting, right now on the job, everybody, we have, well, this number is through 7/31. We have 12,246 top to bottom. We had 58 retirees in August. 62 people put their paperwork in for September. When we're talking about hiring, everybody, Ms. Walker, and this is no reflection on anybody. When we say we have 4 classes tells us nothing. Okay, if we have 4 classes of 150, that is something. If we have 4 classes of 40 or 50, that's, like my colleague said, it's somewhat disturbing, and I don't have the answer for it. And I don't mean this as a negative towards anybody, because only 2,900 people signed up for the last test, and we know what happened. We know how many people actually go through it and how many people get hired. We go through 10 to 1. We go through 10 to get 1 that we hire, and that's fact. It's not Nick Spizzato saying this. This is HR can tell you that. And I don't know if it's changed recently, but as of 6 months ago, that's what it was. So at POs, we have 9,180, but that's not including the 58 in August and the 62 in September. So I don't mean to hijack the meeting, Madam Chair or Director Park. I have the facts in front of me. That's straight from the pension board. If anybody needs it for some reason, it will not allow me to forward this information to anybody by way of text. So.
Well, Alderman, I think you bring up an interesting point. I know you're
Please identify yourself for the record. I know who you are. But
yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. My name is Anastasia Walker. I'm the Executive Director of the Public Safety Administration. What the Chicago Police Department is facing is not germane to them, Alderman, as I'm sure you're aware of.
Yep.
New York Police Department has lost 5,300 people to retirement. Atlanta is short 400 police officers right now. And Portland has gone from hiring 155 people to 30 people. Seattle has gone from hiring 119 people to 44 people. In addition to that, when you look at police officers nationwide, 10% can go and retire today. So not only are we facing something that a lot of law enforcement agencies are facing across the country, we're also competing for the same pool. But as Director Park mentioned, with testing and recruitment, I think we're going to be able to put a dent in it.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that. It's a national crisis. I will dispute your numbers about 10%. I think it's way higher nationally, because as long as you have 20 and 50 at the go, your numbers probably guys that are 60 and over, I would guess. I don't know for sure, but.
Well, I researched the Police Executive Research Forum, and they're actually saying 8.5 can go nationwide right now.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thanks for the information. Thanks for letting me give that point of information, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Alderman Spizzato. Alderman LaSpada.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Just first, a question around how the meeting was noticed. When it was noticed for the 13th and the 16th and for today, it said that this would be a discussion on the 2022 police budget. Not that I don't mind the conversation we're having, but when did the topic change?
It wasn't, if this meeting was in anticipation of the 2022 budget. We do this since the resolution was passed. I think this is the second time we've done this.
Okay, so while it said
So-
it would be about 20.
So can we just go on with your question?
No, I will. My initial question was just trying to understand how the topic was noticed, but I can go on with questions. So one of them was answered by Alderman Beal. I was wondering through the chair if it could be provided the number of sworn officers 2011 through today. I think we expected the number to go down somewhat, if only because we were moving a lot of positions over to the civilian side. So to understand how the number of sworn officers is shifted over time would be very helpful. Could that be provided through the chair?
Yes, we could do that.
Okay. My second question was, I saw that part of our personnel costs is 22 million for uniform allowance. That does not include the officer's firearm, correct? Officers still purchase their own firearms?
Correct. We do not budget for firearms. The uniform allowance is a contractually required cost that we do provide. It's about $1,800 a year, but we do not buy firearms in our budget.
Okay. So like from a policy perspective, then when someone is suspended, they hold on to their firearm then, correct? Because that's their own purchase?
That I do not know. In terms of the operational, if someone is suspended, what happens to their firearm?
Is there a budget question here, Alderman Laspada? We can answer that question you just raised during the budget hearing.
Yeah, I suppose if I may ask it as a budget question, what is the rationale for not as part of the uniform allowance covering the purchase of the firearm as well for the officer?
Is your question, what is so the uniform allowance, is a contractually required cost that we do provide. I guess your question, which I'm not understanding, is what is the...
Sure, I was asking the question. Well, I'll save the question for our contract hearings. There's a train going past. I think I've heard from constituents the concern around why that's not a purchase that is covered through either the contract or the budget, but their concerns are more broadly related to policing reform. So I'll lay that on the table. Those were my main questions for right now.
Thank you, Alderman Laspada. Alderman Spizzato, your hand is still up. Is that another?
No, I
question?
just put it up again, Madam Chair.
Okay,
So it's
you're
just
next, followed by
just a-
Alderman Lopez.
Just a point of clarification, if it helps Alderman Spot out and everybody else. So I know a little bit about uniform allowance because I received it for 18 years as a fireman. So uniform allowance was for us to buy whatever we want, whatever we needed, for laundering our clothes, for socks, for t-shirts, so for whatever we would need. And for police, it's for whatever they need, and they could use that to buy their gun. They can't say this, I'm buying a gun and I'm not using my uniform allowance. It's just money to use what they need for their uniform and whatever.
Thank you, Alderman Spizzato. Alderman
you.
Lopez.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you for keeping true to the resolution so that we could have these pre-budget discussions just on CPD. I appreciate it. And for those who wondered why it was renoticed, we did this because of everything that happened with regards to Officer French, Officer Yanez, and Officer Blah. So I think it was only right and fitting, and agree with the chairman in pushing it back when it was more opportune for us to have this discussion. Is there anybody from CPD here today?
No one from CPD is here with us today. The budget director is capable of answering your budget questions, I believe.
Thank you, Chairman Dow, but I would have liked to have had someone here from CPD, because while I do have a budget question, it requires some explanation as it relates to an item that has come within the department, which I'd like to make sure if we're utilizing funding or underfunding, and that is the Employee Assistance Program. We've seen this year where we've had officers who have committed suicide. We have seen where officers have dealt with a lot of trauma. And even recently, it's come to my attention that even Officer Blas, who was the third officer involved in that horrible Sunday incident, didn't necessarily get the resources needed that I think that the city provides and pays for. So my budget question is, what exactly do we allot for in this budget this year? Where does it go and how do we maximize it, and what are we looking for to enhance it in the coming year? And if budget can answer all of that on behalf of CPD, happy to hear it.
I also think Commissioner Walker could weigh in on this as well. So I'll turn it over to Budget Director Parks first.
Thank you. So as a start, we do budget for the section, which I'm getting the name right now, for our officer wellness. This includes the professional counseling division. You know, with the consent decree, we did increase, you know, when I was at the police department, I think there was, 5 people. And I think we have incrementally increased the number of available clinicians to assist our officers. So that is now, I believe, the budget is at 11 positions there. Now we are talking to the police department. This is a focus also for the mayor in terms of next year and how we incrementally increase the number that is available, the number of clinicians that is available to our officers. And so that is something we're discussing towards an increase for in next year's budget as well. In terms of services, I know there, we have different trainings we provide. With my history at CPD, I know that we provide resources not just for the officers themselves, but also their families. I know CPD has been working with NAMI also to make sure that those resources are available. So that is a big focus, both around the consent decree and also for us in working with CPD. So that is an area that we are looking to increase for next year as well.
Ms. Park, what is the budget? Do you know what the budgeted amount is? What is that? What are those 11 positions and all of that?
Let me get that.
To?
I am getting here. So the professional counseling division in the budget has 17 positions. It's about 1.5 million in positions.
And does that also include whatever our partnership with NAMI is as well, or is that in a separate
So
grant?
that could be, that I believe is separate from that. So I can get more specific detail unless Executive Director Walker has a line item.
If you could provide through the chair what the total spend is for employee wellness, both with direct and indirect services, I would appreciate that.
Yes, we'll do.
And then Commissioner Walker, if you would care to expound on what exactly is offered and available, what we fund and provide, because I think it'd be great for all of us to know what we do as of right now. And then I'm trying to ascertain where we fall short in light of what I've heard with regards to some recent events.
Sure. Can you hear me okay, Alderman?
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. I echo Director Park's sentiments about the 17 positions and the money that has been spent for employee assistance. I know that we are, as Director Park indicated, working on PD's budget submittal for the 2022. And I know employee assistance is a huge priority for the superintendent. So we are still developing that. We know that it's a huge priority. And I think through the chair, we'll be able to get you more specifics about what we're going to be able to do.
Thank you. That was a rather vanilla answer, but I guess I'll have to deal with that for the moment. But what I do find concerning is that, when we have incidents like what we saw transpire a few weeks ago, our employee assistance teams should be out there immediately for all people involved. And what we know happened is that 2 out of the 3 individuals and their families were being helped, and 1 was missed. And that is not a scenario where we need anybody falling through the cracks. We should be able to capture in real time, fully and overwhelmingly, those officers involved in those highly traumatic events as they unfold. And I believe Director Park said that we are going to be making incremental increases. I think we need to make an exponential increase. I think we need to have at least, excuse me, my extended car warranty people calling. I think we need to have at least one EAP person in every district, because I think officers are dealing with trauma on a daily basis, whether it's large or small. And we need to nip it in the bud and start creating and fostering an environment where officers know they have someone they can go to in their own districts, not some stranger who drops in just to see if they're okay, but someone that builds relationships with our officers. Because I don't think we ever want to be in a position where we have to find another officer who's taken his life in the back of a school because he had no one to talk to. That is a failure on our part as a city. And I would like for you to, if nothing else, focus when it comes towards the police budget for next year, to ensuring that if there's going to be an increase anywhere, it's in support for our officers as they're dealing with a very tough job in a very traumatic environment that is always looking to demonize them. And we need to ensure that our officers know that they are supported by the city that they come from.
Alderman, I couldn't agree with you more. You know that I'm probably, I got a little bit of whiskers and some time in public safety. I've been in public safety for 25 years. I know what line of duty deaths do to the city, the communities, families, and it's incredibly tragic and sad. So I know the priority. What I can commit to you today, right now, is to get you a comprehensive, exhaustive list of programs that we have, EAP through the chair, and we can go from there.
Thank you, and look forward to working with the entire budget team to bringing that number of counselors to 22, I believe.
Yes, Alderman, we are working with CPD on their proposal around that. So I look forward to working with you as well.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Alderman
Thank you,
Lopez.
Chairman.
Thank you, Alderman Lopez, for your questions around this issue. I want to thank Director Park, Comptroller Sony, CFO Bennett, and Executive Director Walker for being with us today. Also, Director Ken Williams for being with us today. There being no further business before the committee, can I get a motion to adjourn by the same roll call?
Alderman Garza.
So moved by Alderman Garza. There being no objections, so ordered. The Committee on Budget and Government Operations is therefore adjourned.